And thanks for being patient with me.
No worries.
Do you guys know each other? Have you all met with each other before?
We have not met. No.
We have not
Oh,
met. Good to meet you, Horace.
Are you in DC?
I'm in Northern Virginia.
Okay, yeah, I'm in Tyson, so yeah.
We're super
hey
close.
everyone. We have the monotheistic potluck cousins from different moms joining us. A Muslim and a Jew walk into a Substack Live. What could happen? Only good things. Because today I'm joined by Dr. Deborah Shushan, Senior Resident Affiliate at Georgetown Center for Jewish Civilization and editor of The Debrief. She just joined up on Substack. It's a fantastic Substack. I strongly recommend my subscribers go and subscribe to it right now. She just started, I think, a month ago, right, Deborah?
That's right. Yeah.
So she has 500, and I promised her she'd get to 1,000. Deborah was also director of policy, formerly the previous director of policy at J Street. And you all know Haris. Haris has been a regular on the show. Haris Tareen is the vice president at the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Both of them are in the DMV area. I'm right now in an undisclosed location. I promise I'm safe. I'm blinking twice. All is well. I'm on vacation, but I wanted to really have both of them on because we're talking about some deep, serious, troubling issues as Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has unleashed the National Guard on the nation's capital, taking us closer and closer to authoritarianism, and is welcoming Vladimir Putin and repeating his talking points literally as of today, blaming Ukraine for apparently occupying itself. We've seen that fascism has gone mainstream and has gone global, folks. And on Friday, Israel, specifically the Israeli Security Cabinet, voted to occupy, or rather, I should say, reoccupy Gaza City, just take full control, and then move the Palestinians to the south. Another word for move is transfer. Another word for that is ethnic cleansing. It is considered now a genocide. What is happening? It's not my words. It's Omar Bartov, one of the preeminent historians and scholars on the Holocaust and genocide. It's the words used by B'Tselem, Israeli human rights organizations, the words used by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. If you don't like the word, I do think words matter, but if you don't like the word, war crimes, brutality, starvation. And this is happening with the direct complicity and aid of the United States administration. And furthermore, there are legacy organizations that start off as civil rights organizations that are supporting this. Organizations like ADL and the head of ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, who, in addition to being very troubling the past year, just gave a very troubling interview with the New York Times that we're going to unpack, where he says, criticism of Zionism is the same thing as anti-Semitism. And when he was presented with the definition of genocide, did a kind of like a Jedi mind trick, right? He did like that you will not pay attention to this. And furthermore, has praised the detention of Mahmoud Khalil, the pro-Palestinian student activist who was detained for 104 days without any crimes and missed the birth of his child. This is all happening, folks. And last week, a little piece of news. I keep the receipts. Donald Trump, as one does, said that any city and state that boycotts Israel will be denied relief aid. Thankfully, it was MAGA first. There were the movements within MAGA that said, "What the f?" And then 3 hours later on Twitter, he's like, "Okay, never mind. Sorry, my bad." As all of this is happening, some people say, "Well, this is for security. We need to do this." And yet, anti-Semitism has spiked in the past 2 years. Anti-Palestinian violence has spiked. Islamophobia has spiked. People are being freaking detained, kidnapped. We're seeing college students being less safe. DEI is gone. And none of this is helping the Palestinians who are just literally being eradicated. I contend this is not safe for Israel. I contend this is not safe for the Middle Eastern region and for the United States, which is seen around the world as being complicit with this Israeli regime in the occupation. It is a disaster for everyone. But those are just my thoughts, folks. I have two experts, Deborah and Haris, here who are deeply connected to these issues. They care deeply about their communities, and they will give nuanced perspectives, both their opinions, and Haris is now going to represent all Muslims, and Deborah is going to represent all Jews, to just also tease out what communities are saying. So I've given a mouthful just for the framing, and I want to first start off with the victims. Right, Palestinians are being killed, and we saw this horrific news yesterday. Israel just straight up admitted to bombing a tent with journalists, killed Al Jazeera reporter Anas al-Sharif right after he warned and tweeted about Israel's campaign. A couple hours later, he was killed. Haris, your thoughts about what you just saw? I mean, one of the many tragedies we're seeing almost on an hourly basis.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much, Jahad, for having me back. And I don't know why you're vacationing in Texas. That works.
Family.
Okay. No, that works. Family first. But what happened with the five journalists, the Al Jazeera journalists who were killed in the tent, is essentially what has been happening for the past 2 years in Gaza. After the horrific attacks of October 7th, this has been repeated for the Palestinian people now on a daily basis. And there's what the sad reality of all of this is that nothing is off limits for Netanyahu and his war cabinet. Journalists, aid workers, humanitarian organizations, civilians, hospitals, nothing is off limits for Netanyahu and the IDF right now. And what has to happen, and this will not stop, this will not stop. What has to happen is the US must use the leverage that it has on this administration or the Netanyahu government to make them pull back and stop from the occupation, the full-on occupation. I mean, let's be honest. There was never a time when Gaza was not occupied. If it was not occupied by actual IDF forces, the seas around it were occupied, the air above it was occupied, the water controlled was occupied. So the only thing that was not actually occupied was you didn't have IDF soldiers boots on the ground with checkpoints and actually managing and controlling Gaza. But it had been occupied in every other way, in every other sense. Palestinians could only fish certain places. They could only use so much water. You couldn't fly over Gaza. In all honesty, this is a reoccupation of Israeli forces in Gaza, and the only nation, the only country that has leverage over Israel right now is the United States. And if the United States does not tell Netanyahu that you have to stop and you have to pull back, he will not. Because this is for Netanyahu and his extremist cabinet. This is not all Israelis. I mean, even the chief of the IDF is like, this is crazy. You're telling us to go back in. Hamas's military capabilities have still not been completely degraded. This is going to cause so many deaths on both sides. So the many in Israeli society know this is a crazy idea, but for Netanyahu and his extremist right-wing cabinet, this is exactly what they've been dreaming of. This is what they wanted. They've been talking about this very openly. It's not like they were hiding this. They were talking about this very openly in cabinet meetings, in the public. When they came here to Washington, D.C. to have meetings on Capitol Hill, they said this very openly. And now this is just a natural next step in progression. They want to displace the 2 million people in Gaza, and they want to force them to leave Gaza. That is the goal. That's the ultimate goal. You make living conditions so bad, so horrible, so problematic that people will have to flee. Because at the end of the day, if your kids have been killed, half of your kids have been killed, you don't have water, you don't have food, as a parent or as a caretaker, what are you going to do? You're going to find a way to leave. Those of us who have been refugees, we know how that this works. You make the living conditions so bad for people that they will have to leave, and that is the strategy of of Netanyahu and his extremist cabinet. So this is the reality. What happened to this journalist is been happening every single day for the past 2 years.
Deborah, I want to go. I mean, there's so much to unpack, and we'll talk about it while this is happening. And Benjamin Netanyahu and the leaders of Hamas were cited as war criminals. Republicans, during a recess, instead of voting on releasing the Epstein files, they found time to go to Jerusalem and just took a nice, cushy photo with war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. This happened, folks, just a couple of days ago. But I yield the floor to you, Deborah. Thank you. First time you're on our Substack.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Wajad, for having me. And Horace, it's great to meet you and be on with you. Look, what is happening in Gaza and what has been happening since October 7th since Hamas's heinous attack against Israel, and the killings of over 1,200 Israelis, 250 being taken hostage. We can't forget, of course, that there are still roughly 50 who are hostage in Gaza, 20 believed to be alive. And we know that the conditions that they are being held in, we know this from, horrible recent Hamas videos that show a couple of these individuals, these hostages, starving to death. One who indicated that he was digging his own grave. We have that horrific situation and the desperate need, obviously, for those hostages to be released. And then we have the situation of starvation of the Palestinians in Gaza. These two things are happening in tandem. We have an increasing number of Israelis who are out in the streets, who are demanding an end to this, who are recognizing increasingly the starvation of the Palestinians that is happening in their name. And of course, the desperate need to release these hostages. We have over 600 former, very senior security and intelligence brass, retired Israelis, writing to President Trump and saying exactly what you said, Horace. Basically, you are the one person who can end this, and we need you to end this war. And so, this is absolutely tragic for all of those involved. Um, I would just add that there are those of us who had been indicating for years and working for years before October 7th, 2023, indicating that if there is anything that came close to an existential threat to Israel, and I don't think that there is anything that's an existential threat, but the main threat to Israel was the
Mm.
lack of peace with Palestinians, in which both peoples, Israelis and Palestinians, would have rights, would have dignity, would have self determination, there would be equality, there would be justice, and that the lack of this is obviously, first and foremost horrific for Palestinians who have been living under occupation, before 2023 and October 7th, and also for Israelis, not only for their safety, and obviously, we saw that with the horrific attack on October 7th, not only for their physical safety, but also for Israel's character, what kind of country it's going to be, whether it was going to live up to the founding ideals of Israel's Declaration of Independence, or whether it was going to become a society that would go increasingly right wing, increasingly pro settler. Let's talk for just a minute about a couple of the worst individuals, and there are many within Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. I'm not going to go through all of them, but vis-a-vis the situation in Gaza, one that I do want to mention is Bezalel Smotrich, which I'm sure
Yeah.
most of your viewers are familiar with Smotrich, but they may not be familiar with what happened vis-a-vis Smotrich in 2005. 2005 was the year that Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, himself a lifelong right winger, decided that he was going to pursue disengagement from Gaza, which did not mean the end of Israeli occupation. It was a change in the nature of Israeli occupation. But what it did mean was that Israel was going to remove its settlements from
Yeah.
Gaza and its internal military presence within Gaza. So it was a fundamental change in the nature of the occupation and a removal of the settlements. Bezalel Smotrich, who himself is a settler, lives in a settlement in the West Bank, one of many members of the Netanyahu cabinet who do, was arrested in 2005 as part of a cell of individuals who possessed 700 liters of gasoline, and it was suspected that they were going to blow up the Ayalon highway to try to prevent Israel's disengagement from Gaza. So this is a man who has always favored Israeli settlement in Gaza, who has always favored Israeli boots on the ground occupation of Gaza, did everything that he could, including breaking the law and endangering lives, to prevent the disengagement in 2005. And now, as one of the very most powerful people in Israel's government, which is a shanda beyond all shandas, that's Yiddish for shame, is acting to ensure the reoccupation of Gaza with as few Palestinians left within the territory as possible, and of course wants to see something very similar happen in the West Bank. And for me as a Jew, for me as someone who cares tremendously about Israel, I have relatives there. I've worked for pro-Israel organizations. This is heartbreaking beyond all belief, and something that we have to work together, Muslims and Jews, and turn the tide. It's just terrible for all of us.
Deborah, I appreciate you taking the time to actually talk about Smotrich and connect the dots, because what's common for you, me, and Harris is not common for everyone who's watching. And folks, it's really important for those to know that, as Harris said, Israel's own military right now is going against this plan that was announced by the Security Cabinet on Friday. They realize it's going to be disastrous. You had former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, not a dove, by any means necessary. Israel's former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, for the past couple of months, has gone on social media, has gone on the press, has written an article saying that these are now war crimes. You had another previous Prime Minister, who was Prime Minister for a short period of time, Yair Lapid, openly criticizing it. And when Benjamin Netanyahu said, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to send the Palestinians to these camps in the south," his words, not mine, concentration camps, right? The family members of the hostages, and I'm thank you, Deborah, for reminding everyone that they still have Israeli hostages. Guess who doesn't care about the Israeli hostages? Smotrich, the finance minister.
And
Itmar,
Netanyahu, not just Smotrich.
yeah, yeah. The Israeli regime, this Israeli regime does not care. So for over the past year, if you've noticed, folks, the family members of the Israeli hostages have realized before most Americans that, oh, my government does not care about Israeli hostages. They're perfectly fine, willing to kill them or have them killed for this messianic image of conquest. Smotrich has openly said it. Ben Gvir, who's the national security minister, another person you might not all know, who is so extreme, folks, that an Israeli journalist said, imagine if a KKK leader became national security minister. That's Itmar Ben Gvir. Israel's own government indicted Ben Gvir for inciting terrorism. That's the guy, folks. These are the people right now in Israel's regime and government going against the military, going against Israeli intelligence, going against former Israeli prime ministers, going against the family members begging for a ceasefire because they realize this will kill the remaining hostages. But again, I want to go back to America real quick, and then we're going to talk about how this is playing out on levels within our communities. Just last week, there was this photo, Horace, of Republicans who went to Jerusalem. I'm looking at the photo right now. I'll put it up in the post. And they took a smiling photo with war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. Last week, Horace. The reason why they're able to do that is because Mike Johnson, super Christian, called a recess because he would rather have a suspension of the Congress than them voting for the release of the Epstein files, right? So he's like, nope, never mind, recess. And so in their recess, they decide to go to Jerusalem and take a smiling photo with Benjamin Netanyahu, who right now is probably like the least popular leader in the world, right? Even Israelis hate this man. And then a couple of weeks ago, last month, you had a bipartisan photo when Netanyahu visited for the third time the White House, and you had Chuck Schumer, Jackie Rosen, Chris Coons, Cory Booker, who else? A few other, Adam Schiff, with a few other Republicans taking a photo with war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. Harris, your take on this?
Well, I mean, I completely agree. I saw that picture. That picture was horrible. Just that image of Mike Johnson and all of these members. And then the worst of all is Randy Fine. Randy Fine is an absolute monster online. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but
I
he is
sadly
a
do because I'm a
hateful
masochist.
bigot. A hateful bigot. He hates, and he openly talks about hating Muslims, hating Palestinians, allowing them to starve, dropping a nuclear bomb essentially on Gaza. Someone like Randy Fine is in the middle of that picture. You've got Netanyahu there, and then you've got the Republican leadership of the Republican Party in Congress in that photo. I mean, what should concern us is that is that Americans, we Americans, the majority of Americans, don't support what Netanyahu is doing. Then why are the members of Congress from now both parties? I'd love to just give it to the Republicans, but the Democrats, especially the leadership of the Democratic Party in this Congress, including Jeffries and Schumer and other folks, they have been quiet. And there was a delegation of Democrats that just went to Israel as well with AIPAC. So the question is, if the majority of Americans don't believe that what Netanyahu is doing is good for Israel, good for America, good for the region, why are these members of Congress going and taking pictures with a, like you said, a war criminal? That's something we have to ask ourselves. But that comes back to our domestic politics as well. Our domestic politics is really, really messy when it comes to this issue. APAC has a stronghold on our domestic policy. So it's the alliance of APAC and the Christian nationalist movement in this country, that is going to be not only bad for America, it's bad for the state of Israel, it is bad for the region, and it is bad for both Jews and Muslims and everyone else in this country. Because the alliance between the right wing national Christian nationalist movement in this country and AIPAC, Likud, supporting leaders in the pro Israel movement, it is causing havoc on our college campuses. It is causing havoc on our streets. It is causing havoc between communities, the fabric of our society, the Muslim communities, Jewish communities. All of that is being impacted by this alliance. Anti-Semitism, unfortunately, a real problem, a real challenge in this country, is being used as a tool to go after immigrants, to go after college students, to go after professors. We have professors calling us saying, when this new definition of IRA that our schools are adopting, it's going to impact my curriculum. I cannot teach about the Middle East anymore. I cannot be critical of Israeli policy because the school will come back and censure me. So it's an alliance. So when you see them going to Israel, both Republicans and Democrats, that has to do with our domestic politics. That's where we, as Muslims, Jews, people of all faiths and not no faith, we have to come together and say that we have to push back against this extremist agenda. Because what I don't want to happen in the U.S. is what happened in Israel. Israel used to have a robust left. Israel used to have a very robust civil society. There was a lot of debate, a lot of engagement from the left, and anti-war and pro-peace movements and institutions and organizations. Much of that infrastructure in Israel has been impacted. The right wing a movement in Israel has completely deconstructed the left and pro-peace movement in Israel. And we can't allow that to happen domestically here. The Israelification of America is what I'm telling folks. We can't allow that to happen. We have to be loud. We have to push back against AIPAC. We have to tell Democrats, especially right now, that they have to take a pledge to not take a dollar from AIPAC. That has to be something that we have to because AIPAC is not helping Jews in America, or in my opinion, Jews in Israel. And so every Democrat, every pro-peace, every two-state supporter, every individual who wants to see that region thrive and be at peace has to take a pledge to say, I will not take a penny from AIPAC, because it's not only impacting what's happening in the region, but it's also impacting our domestic capacity to push back and build a pro-peace movement.
Lot to unpack there, and we'll follow the threads separately. But it is important to note, folks, and I'm glad Harris brought it up. One of Benjamin Netanyahu's biggest support doesn't come from American Jews. It comes from white Christian evangelicals. The largest Zionist group in America is SCUFI, Christians United for Israel. Christians United for Israel is run by Pastor John Hagee. Pastor John Hagee is based out of Texas. And folks, it's really important because you need the nuances because everyone gets lumped. All the Muslims get lumped with Palestinians, get lumped with Arabs, get lumped with Hamas, get lumped with ISIS, get lumped with like Al Qaeda. All the Jews get lumped with Israel. It's all nonsense because when it comes to American Jews, most of them voted who? Kamala Harris and Democrats. They are not aligned with Netanyahu and they're not aligned with Donald Trump. Benjamin Netanyahu loves Kufi, white Christian evangelicals. And by the way, folks, if you've been in the weeds like we have, these white Christian evangelicals, not all of them, but these groups, these Christian Zionists, love Israel. Jews, not so much, right? And Deb, speaking about how this is playing out domestically, a majority of Americans are increasingly critical of Israel. A majority of Americans want a ceasefire. A majority of Americans dislike Netanyahu. A majority of American Jews are going in New York for Mamdani. They hate Netanyahu, right? They dislike AIPAC. However, you have certain legacy organizations saying, we represent the Jews, and the Jews support Israel and what's happening right now. And one of those groups is the ADL. As the member, as the sole representative of all Jews, Deborah, can, can you break down and respond to Harris, please, whatever you want, but really break it down of the reality of the nuances within American Jewish communities and how you respond to it when it happens in our communities as well. What Muslim communities, Desi communities, some people say, we represent Muslims. They're like, you do not represent me. But right now, in particular, the ADL is going on a blitzkrieg. And the head of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, just did this huge interview in New York Times. And the ADL is now all of a sudden really comfy with the same administration they used to protest 10 years ago and with the Elon Musks and saying, no, we represent the American Jews and where they stand on Israel. I yield the floor to you.
Oh boy, so much to unpack. All right, so
Yeah,
before I get into ADL, which I will in just a second, I just want to say two things real quick. Horace talked about the measures that right-wing Israeli governments have been taking against Israeli civil society. This is a really important point, and it's something that has been happening in Israel for years. I do just want to say this. In my years working on the Israel-Palestine issue, one of the things I feel like I've been most privileged to do is work with anti-occupation Israeli civil society organizations who have been working in incredibly difficult conditions and really just doing such important work. And I thank Waj for promoting my Substack. And if I could just say one thing real quickly, one of the things that I really look forward to doing in my Substack, The Debrief, is to promoting their voices. I just did a live conversation a few days ago with Tanya Harry, who is the executive director with an Israeli organization called Gisha. It's the one Israeli human rights organization that is focused on Palestinian human rights in Gaza. And so those organizations are so important. They're working in such difficult circumstances. And I think it's really important to elevate their voices. The other thing I want to just say real quick before I get to the ADL.
No need for quick. Take your time. Say what you got to say.
All right. Well, so on the issue of Christian Zionism, one thing that just with everything that has happened in this country since January 20th, and the zone being flooded, obviously it is very difficult for us all to pay attention to every single goddamn thing. And some really important things get missed. And one of the things that I think has gotten very little attention is the fact that we now have, for the first time ever, a U.S. ambassador to Israel who is an evangelical Christian, Christian Zionist who basically believes in a foreign policy that advances his version of the end times, which, by the way, doesn't work out really well for the Jewish people, right?
Deb, For those who don't know, can you tell them the story? Because it doesn't work out for you or me, but just tell people the story. What Huckabee believes, because I think it's important.
So I mean, the story is that basically, and I mean, there are those who can, explain this a lot better than I can. I'm not in, an expert on dispensationalism, but basically the belief is that a series of things have to happen in the Holy Land, including, that there has to be a Jewish state, et cetera, and that ultimately then you will have the end times, the rapture, et cetera. And anybody who doesn't convert to Christianity, like, the three of us on this call, go to hell. So we are, but, the Jewish people are an instrument of this
So
project.
there you go.
Unfortunately, disastrously, there are, right wingers in Israel who are on board with this and figure, well, as long as we can get totally uncritical, totally unrestricted support from this population of people, we'll let it all get sorted out in the end times and see who's right. But for right now, we're more than happy to take their support. And you actually have had both Benjamin Netanyahu and one of his most senior advisors, Ron Dermer, who is an Israeli American who actually literally in all of his years living in the United States was a Republican operative, who have said, forget Jewish Americans.
Yep.
Those guys are, there's so many of them who are not, not either not pro-Israel or not sufficiently pro-Israel because, they want to see Israel as a democratic state. They care about, Palestinian human rights. Screw those people. The people who we can depend, and by the way, there aren't that many of us anyway. The much more numerous group who are willing to give totally uncritical support to right wing pro occupation policies in Israel are the evangelical Christians, and that is really represented in the person of Mike Huckabee, who is now our ambassador to Israel, who, by the way, just attended a settler conference in the huge settlement of Ariel. It's basically a city settlement in Ariel in the West Bank. I mean,
I've
this
been there.
is sorry.
I've been there. I've been to. I reported and did a piece about Ariel. It is not, folks. When it's a settlement, when Deb says it's huge, it's like a city.
It's a
And
city.
in this illegal settlement in the West Bank, this massive city, grocery stores,
University.
it had universities. I went there, and there was at the time when I went 7 years ago, there was a state of the art fitness center. And the state of the art fitness center. Do you all want to know who was named after? Hagee, Pastor Hagee, the head of
Wow.
Christian Israel. Sorry, Deb, I had to just throw that little factoid in there.
No, no, no. And look, it's not the first time that we have had a pro settlement ambassador to Israel. I remind all of you about Trump's ambassador to Israel in his first term, and that was David Friedman, who was just
Yep.
as much in favor of settlements and, land of Israel and an opponent of a two-state solution uh, as Mike Huckabee. So, first we had Friedman, and now we have sort of the culmination of all of that in Mike Huckabee, and really the actualization of, the show of, that the U.S. ambassador to Israel is not really the ambassador to Israel, but the ambassador to Greater Israel. To make sure that there is never actually a two-state solution and rights for Palestinians. Okay, so I spoke for longer than I thought I
No,
would.
no,
For
I think it's very important. I think I'm so glad we're spending time on this, and I'm the beneficiary of having two smart guests because usually I have to be the one talking and filling in the gaps. I could just press play on both of you, but I think people really need to know what's happening right now, how this is all connected, right? Mike Huckabee is the ambassador. He represents white Christian evangelicals. We saw Pete Hegseth, literally over the weekend retweet the Christ of Church interview on CNN, where openly they're saying we should repeal the 19th Amendment. Women should not have certain positions. Women should belong in the House. And Pete Hegseth Another white Christian nationalist retweeted that supported, has not taken it away. And these people believe that Jews need to control Jerusalem as a necessary precondition for the return of Jesus. And when Jesus comes back, he will kill first the Jews, then the Muslims. So it's Jews are being seen as a pawn and an instrument, which is a theme that we'll see during this administration, right? Very clearly, they don't care about Jews, folks. If they cared about Jews, oh, I don't know, maybe they wouldn't promote the replacement theory, that anti-Semitic conspiracy, or maybe they wouldn't have, Nazi ideologies, or maybe, Donald Trump wouldn't use the word Shylock, or maybe he wouldn't sit down with Nick Fuentes, a dude who loves Hitler. If you cared about anti-Semitism and Jews, but they're using Jews as a battering ram, right? And then speaking about ADL now, Deb, and I want you to talk about this before I give it to Horace. The ADL, we always try to bring the receipts. During the first Trump administration, as a civil rights organization, went against Trump, went against the civil rights abuses, right? But then something happened. Like so many corporations and so many institutions, they're like, oh, we're in a fascist moment right now. Oh, the right wing seems to be in power. Oh, Israel, we could support Israel. Jews, but we could support Israel. And now the ADL gives a pass to Elon Musk, who, in my opinion, and Deb and Harris, I want to know your opinion. Elon Musk did a double sig Heil. Exuberant display of enthusiasm. Oh, don't worry about Donald Trump using the word Shylock. We're going to work with this administration to combat anti-Semitism. And then you had Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the ADL, give a very troubling interview over the weekend with the New York Times. I'm sure we all read. And he said that institution represents American Jews. Deb, before I go to Harris, I do want you, take your time.
Okay. Well,
she's crossing her arms, folks. She's leaning in.
Yes. All right. The situation let me just make, for any of your viewers who are not aware, the ADL is the Anti-Defamation League. This is an organization that is well over 100 years old. It dates back to 1913. And in the interview that Jonathan Greenblatt just did with the New York Times, it was really interesting to me that the first thing that he did, as he's, speaking in the interview, was to harken back to ADL's mission, which has been the same ever since 1913. And the mission, it's I'll read it. It's super short. It is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment for all. And Jonathan Greenblatt cited this in the interview, and he said, we've always understood at the ADL, we are the earliest proponents of intersectionality. We've always understood as a small minority community that our safety as Jewish Americans is bound up with the safety of other minorities and, all Americans. And while the ADL continues, we continue to hear that line from Jonathan Greenblatt, and the mission is still prominent on the website. Unfortunately, and let me just say that I think it is absolutely vital that we have an organization with the mission of the ADL. I mean, it's absolutely vital that we have an organization that is, fighting against anti-Semitism and all other forms of hate, working with other minority communities. I mean, that's absolutely vital. Unfortunately, and I don't think that it's just, since the Trump administration came back or since 2023, or, I think this is a longer standing issue. And I have a lot of concerns about Jonathan Greenblatt specifically, and he's now been the head of the ADL for 10 years. And I have, talked to plenty of, former ADL employees who have since left and who have, also indicated their concerns with where this organization is going. And the crux of it, I think, really is this insistence by the ADL under Greenblatt's leadership that anti-Zionism is, first of all, equals anti-Semitism, period, full stop, no matter what, always. And that's something that he said back in 2016 at the UN, right? So this is not a new position on his part. It's basically a position he's had ever since he took over as the head of the ADL. So on the one hand, that, and on the other hand, while most of us understand that the biggest threat to Jews and to our democracy comes from right wing, fascism, essentially. Basically, Jonathan Greenblatt has drawn an equivalency between the left and the right and indicated that anti Semitism is coming equally from both sides, and has formed a partnership, a relationship with the Trump administration in ways that act against our democracy, particularly on college campuses, where the ADL is obsessed with Palestinian activism, activism by anti-Zionist groups, not just by Palestinians, by the way, but by Jewish groups as well, like Jewish Voice for Peace, which the ADL and Jonathan Greenblatt have had it out for JVP for years now, going back to before October 7th. And all of this is incredibly dangerous. It's bad for the Jewish people. One other thing that I really think needs to be noted, and this absolutely goes back before the second Trump administration, goes back before October 7th, is that the ADL, while perhaps not as bad as AIPAC, which I could talk about, I could talk about AIPAC for a very long time, especially having worked for an organization that was basically founded to be the antidote to AIPAC. The ADL has not been quite as much of a shill for right wing Israeli governments as AIPAC has. However, while on the one hand indicating, and Greenblatt still maintains that he is a proponent of the two-state solution. I mean, you can say that you favor a two-state solution from now until the cows come home, but if you basically are defending the policies of the Israeli government and trying to pass laws that will prevent Americans of conscience from taking positions against the occupation. And here I refer to things like the Israel Anti-Boycott Act. You're
Yep.
actually not doing anything to further the two-state solution or, Israel's security. And, let me just throw in the name of Zoran Mamdani for a second here. Jonathan Greenblatt has also, had it out for Mamdani. He wrote an op-ed of all places on Fox News's website. And one of the things that he did in that piece was to smear Mamdani in talking about a bill that Mamdani championed as an assemblyman from Queens in the New York State legislature. It's a piece of legislation called the Not on Our Dime Act. I have read this bill. I know what it actually says. And what the bill tries to do is to prevent charitable organizations that are registered in the state of New York from supporting illegal settlement activity in the occupied West Bank. Now, Greenblatt, in this op-ed that he wrote on foxnews.com, of all places, basically smearing Mamdani, says that Mamdani was trying to prevent charitable organizations from sending aid to Israel. And if you see the sleight of hand there, or more than a sleight of hand, what he is doing is basically erasing the green line between internationally recognized Israel and the occupied West Bank, which is something that the ADL has been doing for years, including by championing legislation like the Israel Anti-Boycott Act. And, I, as someone who wants to see peace between Israelis and Palestinians and has been working for organizations that have that as their mission statement for years, have been incredibly concerned to see that sort of position. And we've just seen, you know, and here we are in this, you know, incredibly dangerous time. And the ADL, rather than kind of learn lessons here, is just, you know, is just doubling down in a way that I think most Jewish Americans either realize or will come to realize is very dangerous for the Jewish people. And I'll just say one more thing about the New York Times interview, if I can, Waj. Um, at the very end, Lulu Garcia Navarro um, asks Jonathan Greenblatt if he is at all concerned about the future of his organization, right? Of the ADL and of, you know, potential support from younger generations of Jews for the organization, right? Given the kinds of positions that the ADL is taking. And it's just fascinating to me the lack of self, the lack of awareness, the lack of understanding of where Jewish Americans are, especially the next generation. That his answer, he's basically like, Lulu, what are you talking about? Have you gone to these major fancy Jewish synagogues on the Upper West Side? Like, don't you know what it's like? And it's like, really? I mean, is that what American Jewry is to you? Is that, I mean, you know, I think the majority of Jewish Americans, I don't have the statistics in front of me, are actually unaffiliated, don't even belong to synagogues, right? And, you know, so, you know, the guy is very sadly out of touch, and that's not going to be good for his own organization. But obviously, you know, the bigger issue here is what this is, I think, doing to our democracy, and what it's doing, you know, what it's doing to Palestinians, and then also, you know, what it is doing to Jewish Americans to have, you know, the foremost organization that purports to be, you know, an expert in keeping the unquestioned data on anti-Semitism, that's not actually keeping our community safe and not even producing reliable data on anti-Semitism because they can't correctly define anti-Semitism. All right,
Uh,
get off my
Deb,
soapbox.
Deb had to get that out. Deb had to, folks. Deb had that insider for a year. Deb had to get it out. I think it's the first time she publicly said it. I appreciate it. Horace, thank you for your patience. Horace is like, she's cooking. Let her cook. Horace also, much like Deb, and I really appreciate this conversation. We have 1,000 people watching. Fantastic comments. I'm so glad you all are enjoying this. I knew when I got both these guests, it'll be very informative and the type of information, unfortunately, that should be people should be getting on corporate media, but they sadly don't. Harris, just a couple of days ago, messaged me upon reading Jonathan Greenblatt's interview with Lulu Garcia in the New York Times, and he was very troubled. And he goes, "Please, can we have a conversation? And can you bring in a Jewish faith partner to talk about this? Because this is terrible. This is terrible for our democracy, and this is terrible for America." Horace, I yield the floor to you. What about that interview so disturbed you?
You know what disturbed me was I was in government for 10 years. I was in a national security and homeland security space. I was at the Department of Homeland Security. I was one of the individuals who were charged with implementing what Jonathan Greenblatt actually spoke about, the national anti-Semitism strategy that the Biden administration produced, which he said his organization was heavily involved in. And I saw firsthand the work that ADL did inside of government. I also, at the Department of Homeland Security, saw the partnerships that government and law enforcement agencies actually have with the ADL in providing data on anti-Semitism, making sure Jewish communities are safe, protecting synagogues, protecting institutions. I saw all of that firsthand from inside of government, and I saw the importance of a group like the ADL and being able to provide reliable, fact-based based data to government and law enforcement agencies to keep Jewish communities safe. But the problem is the ADL now, under Greenblatt, over the past 10 years and after October 7th, they've moved away from what they did best, which was serve as an institution that provided data, that provided expertise on anti-Semitism. They have lost that credibility and are continuing to lose that credibility by the day. I would no longer, if I'm a law enforcement agent, if I was in government today, which I am not, thankfully, I would not want to take ADL data anymore. I would not want to touch that data because I think a lot of that data is dirty. There's dirty data now. Now, so what troubled me with Greenblatt's interview was that, and Navarro pushed him a few times just to clarify his positions.
Yeah.
What was really interesting was that the ADL under Greenblatt, they're getting out of the solidarity business. They are no longer into the intersectionality, solidarity, civil rights business. That, at least that's what they're projecting to the world. Whether I know there's a lot of internal strife that's happening within the ADL. I know there's people leaving, people pushing back. That's happening. But what this leadership has chosen to do was step out of the solidarity business, step out of democracy building business. They're no longer working in the protecting the fabric of democracy in this country. It is about the interests of this current regime in Israel. And regardless of the outcome, they want to support what Netanyahu is doing at this moment. So you see that manifest in multiple ways. And I've been, in all honesty, it's not just the ADL. I've been very disappointed in the civil rights community at large in the U.S. since October 7th. The moral clarity that they needed, that someone like a Dr. King or others would have had in a situation like this, that moral clarity is not there in the leadership of the national and legacy civil rights organizations. I'm not going to name. I'll let that be for another time. So I'm very much disappointed in the civil rights community and their response to Gaza and the moral clarity that they need. But what ADL has decided to do is become an interest group, not a preserving democratic principles and values group. The sad reality of all of this is, why have we as American Muslims, American Jews, Americans of all backgrounds, why have we been successful in America to a certain extent? We've been successful because we've had a pluralistic, democratic society that allows us to push back when we don't agree, that allows us to fight for our rights when we need to fight for our rights, that allows us for dissent. Those are the bedrocks. That's the bedrock of our success as American Jews and American Muslims. But what ADL is doing, they have completely lost legitimacy in that movement now. They're no longer a solidarity movement. And what they're doing, not only are they not a solidarity movement, and what I've seen over the past year that I've been out of the government and in the advocacy space, what I've seen ADL do is push other advocacy and civil rights organizations to take positions that are just morally bankrupt. And whether that's by supporting them financially, whether that's
What's
giving
an
them certain
example, Connor,
access. Sorry.
to you? What's an example of a morally bankrupt position that they've pushed other organizations to take or pressured them to take?
Number one, on the Gaza issue itself, a lot of organizations are afraid to come out and talk about Gaza with moral clarity. To say that this is whatever you want, whatever language you want to use, genocide, war crimes, starvation, whatever it may be. But other groups have not been able to do that. And I know to a large extent, a lot of that is pressure at the leadership level, at the institutional leadership level, from people like Greenblatt and others and funders who have stepped in and spoken to the leadership of these institutions, right? You see what's happening on college campuses. What's happening on college campuses should shock the conscience of every group. Just a few years ago, we were dealing with issues of post George Floyd on campuses and on the streets. What's going to be the response of a right wing administration in Washington D.C. if there are another set of mass protests that take place when our country needs it, when we need to push back against state sanctioned violence that happens around this country? We're not seeing the type of pushback to the ICE raids in LA and in other cities. So the problem, and this is why I feel so passionate about it, because my field is civil rights and advocacy and protecting communities, right? ADL has ceded that space. ADL's data is now dirty data when it comes to anti-Semitism, because and Jonathan Greenblatt, he was very open in that interview in the New York Times. He said, "Listen, my definition of anti-Zionism is that if you don't believe that the Jewish people have the right to a homeland. Nobody's arguing that. We're not arguing anti-Zionism here. I'm not arguing Zionism with you here. What I'm arguing is that however you want to define it right now, there is a genocide taking place. You need to be, you need to have moral clarity. There's also students being arrested. I don't care about the definition. If the student can't talk about his or her opinions openly, what is the purpose of having a democratic society? And what the ADL has been part of, unfortunately, or a party to, is supporting or initially praising the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil and some of the other
Horrific.
students,
That
and
that
then they
that tweet was
slowly try to
painful.
walk it back a little bit. They tried to walk it back because they knew that it was really problematic. But that's why I think the ADL has lost so much credibility now. I mean, when you're on, even on the Hill, I have meetings on the Hill, and I talk to certain members, and they say, you know, we used to take ADL as a solid fact-based institution where we relied on numbers from them on all sorts of things, not just anti-Semitism. They did a lot of great work on white supremacist violence, on Christian nationalism, on neo-Nazi groups, KKK groups. Now there are offices on the Hill today that'll tell you we're not taking that data from them anymore.
If you all can stay for 8 more minutes, I promised only an hour. But Deb and Horace, if you can give me till 1:10, and I have to go to someone else, but it's just really good. Um, so thank you. And we have over 1,000 people watching. Anytime you talk about Israel and Palestine and these issues, I'm like, if we could get 500 people watching, that'd be great. But the fact that you have 1,000 people watching means the world cares, which is good, and this audience cares. Deb, I want to go to you for this final question, then go to Horace. Horace and I hope Horace doesn't mind this, me sharing this. We've been talking for the last 2 years. Almost, it's been 2 years, folks, since October 7th, the terrorism attack and the response. I remember I tweeted a couple of weeks, maybe a week after October 7th. I said, my fear is that this current Israeli regime, much like the United States after 9/11, will squander the world's goodwill by pursuing this type of belligerence and violence that will turn the world against it. And oh, I got hated on Twitter, and all the bots came out. And I remember what happened in the United States of America. I said the same thing after 9/11. I said, watch the Bush administration squander this. And now you've seen it. It's 22 months later. Deb, in my lifetime, there's only one other issue that I've seen change, like an issue flip so quickly. I remember Obama term one to Obama term two when it came to marriage equality. All of us are old enough. We're like, oh my God, what had just happened? Remember that? And then Palestine. In the past 22 months, if you would have told me 2 years ago that a majority of Americans would be pro-Palestinian, I'm like, not in my lifetime. If you would have told me that 27 Democratic senators, which is still low, but again, considering because the bar is so low, it's in hell, would vote last week to stop aid to Israel, stop weapons to Israel, I'd said, not in my lifetime. If you would have told me 300,000 people in Sydney, Australia during their reign would march for pro-Palestine, I'm like, get out of here. If you would have told me Irish rappers, Kneecap, would give zero Fs and say free, free Palestine, I'm like, nah. Israel in 2 years, in my lifetime, has lost the majority, has lost the youth, has lost the culture. And I recall in the 80s when I was young, but being a student of history, once you lose the youth, the majority, and the culture, that ain't a good sign. That was South Africa and apartheid in the 80s. And I'm old enough to remember that the bad guys in Lethal Weapon 2 were South Africans. Okay. I talked to Horace and I said, man, if this continues, and this was like last year we said this,
You know,
I do not see how Israel sustains itself in 10 years. I've revised that, Deb, to 5 to 7 years. Like the way this is going right now for Israel, and even ADL, and when it came to that interview, the pushback, they're taking a short term win at the cost, in my opinion, of long term security for the state of Israel, for Jews, not to mention the complete annihilation of Palestinians and also the region. Israel and this current regime in the past 22 months has done 35,000 targeted strikes against Palestinians, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. To me, this is like seeing a car go 120 miles per hour to a wall. Like, and like the rest of us are like, please stop. And people are like, no, 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 we'll be fine. That's my read on this. Your take, Deb.
So I see things a little bit differently. Um, I, I mean, I'm obviously very concerned about the situation for Israel as someone who cares, as I've already said, very deeply for Israel. Um, I, I don't see the state of Israel going anywhere. The question is, what kind of Israel is it going to be? And is it going to be a country where um, that Jews around the world are going to have pride in, on the one hand? Is it going to be a country that is at peace with Palestinians, that has peace with its neighbors? We know that the entire Arab world wants to make peace with Israel, has offered to make peace with Israel, as long as there is a state for Palestinians. And of course, the Netanyahu government is completely squandering that, even though it has indicated he's very interested in peace with Saudi Arabia and all of that. I'm concerned. I'm concerned, obviously, about Israeli democracy, which was a major issue. Even before October 7th, when you had hundreds of thousands of Israelis regularly out on the streets protesting against the judicial coup that the Netanyahu government was mounting in its first several months before October 7th happened. I'm concerned. Let me give you a little anecdote. I was in Israel not too long before October 7th. It was July 2023, and I met up with an Israeli friend who is, highly educated, secular Israeli. These are the folks who power the Israeli economy, who serve in the Israeli army when, you have the ultra Orthodox population that refuses to serve in the army. These are the folks who make the whole thing run. And do you know that this friend told me that she and her family were in the process of trying to secure German passports?
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, and I say this as the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. I mean, it is incomprehensible. And you have Avram Berg, who was once the speaker of the Israeli Knesset, who years ago was advising all Israelis who could do so to get a second passport.
Yep.
Um, and I really worry quite a bit about, you know, Israelis of conscience deciding that, you know, for various reasons, including what Israel's doing to the Palestinians, what is happening with Israeli democracy, that this just isn't the place for them anymore. Um, and what that is going to mean in terms of what Israeli society is going to look like, a decade from now. So I'm not, I don't think that Israel as a country is going anywhere, but I worry very deeply about what that country is going to look like, what that society is going to look like. And I sure as hell wish that, pro-Israel organizations, including ADL and APAC, would be a little bit more concerned about this and do the right things that they need to do to actually make Israel a country that we can all be proud of, and want to see succeed and thrive in the world.
I just want to be clear. I was saying Israel was not going to disappear, but it would be, in my opinion, it is going to become a pariah state, and the type of state that is no longer even a functionally democratic state, a fascist state, surrounded by countries that are aggrieved and further radicalized and isolated from the world. Horace, finally to you. And thank you all for staying a bit extra. I also stayed a bit extra. I have a conversation with Allison Gill of Mueller. She wrote in 5 minutes, folks. Stick around. We're going to be talking about fascism here. The fact that there's a National Guard unleashed in the nation's capital. But Horace, your concerns about the short term and long term damage to the Palestinians, to Jews, Israel, the region, and Muslims. If these individuals, such as Netanyahu, Huckabee, white Christian evangelical Zionists, Ben Gvir, are not stopped, and if the people cannot roll back their messianic vision of supremacy.
and the danger to America, which I had, right? So it's not just
Yeah.
Israel, it's not just Muslims, Jews. It's the danger to American. First of all, anti-American sentiment is at its highest in a really long time, and it was pretty low in the region because of Iraq and Afghanistan and all of the issues that we had in the past 20 years. But after October 7th, it's gotten even worse. And places where traditionally you had high levels of support for it was at the high levels of positive American sentiment, like Kosovo, like Bosnia, Albania, where in the 90s American leadership stepped in to stop ethnic cleansing and genocide there. They've had historically high ratings of America. Even in those places now, you're seeing lots of anti-American sentiment because of what's happening in Gaza. So the danger for to me, for me, is that's the biggest danger. Is America is losing any credibility that it had to be a partner in that conflict. That's done. So when you have someone like Mike Huckabee, who is your ambassador. We used to have experts and people who had been part of the peace process as ambassadors, and there was a semblance of like, okay, we're trying to stay neutral. We want to be neutral, but we're really not. But if you've got someone like Huckabee, whose daughter, the governor of Arkansas, was just there this week and visiting settlements and signing agreements with companies who are based in settlements with the state of Arkansas. When you've got that type of extremism, that level of extremism, people see right through it, and they know that America no longer has any interest in resolving this conflict in any peaceful way. So that's the first thing: is a danger to America, and also the danger that it's causing to the fabric of our society. I really truly believe that Netanyahu is an ethno-nationalist extremist, right? And there are people in this administration who are ethno nationalist extremists as well. And there are people in the Middle East who are ethno nationalist extremists, and in India and in Russia and in China, who want to see a world where democratic norms and democratic values and democratic principles are a thing of the past. They want to go back to how the world used to be, where one race a nation is made up of one race, and everybody has their own nations, and everybody has their own countries. And we've got people like that in this administration. We've got people like that here in Washington D.C. that hold those ideals and those values, and they're allowing for Netanyahu to do what he does, so they can do what they want. So this is an alliance of fascists, of ethno nationalists, of anti-democratic norms and international law. These people want all of them gone. You remember when John Bolton talked about the UN and, like, 7 floors of the UN being completely wiped out. The fact that Bolton now seems like a dove compared to what we have now. Imagine where we are, right? They don't want to see any international norms, international relations, international law. All of that is a thing of the past for these people. So that's the danger that we're facing as a society, as a democracy, and then in the region, you're just going to have more war. I was talking to Trina Parsi this morning. Actually, he had just written a piece, and he was saying that he believes there's going to be another war between Iran and Israel, because the calculation that both the leaders of in Israel and in Tehran have made was that they need to keep this conflict going to a certain extent, and so the region is just going to become more unstable. And what we're not talking about, what people are not talking about, there are millions, hundreds of millions of people in that region, the majority youth. The Arab world is a very young population, and people don't realize this. The majority are youth in Egypt, in Syria, in Jordan, even in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia, but there's a little bit more prosperity there, so you don't hear the same sentiments. They are watching a live stream genocide take place in their neighborhood. The leaders may want peace. People are furious. People are watching on live, on Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya, on a daily basis. They're watching people die. You don't think that has an impact on the psyche of the young people in the region? You don't think that has an impact on the future that they see themselves vis-a-vis Israel in America and the West? These are issues that we're not even considering right now because we've got a lot of dictators in that region, tampering these down. But you can't do that forever. The Arab Spring showed us that you cannot continue to ignore people. Yeah, you might be able to crack down for a little bit, but after a while it's gonna rise up to the top, and it's basically a big pressure cooker, that whole region. And if Israel continues to do this, that region will explode eventually.
And the world is turning away both from America and Israel.
Yeah.
We're isolating ourselves and letting the worst voices, the most extreme voices, take control. The most corrupt voices. I also want to add the most corrupt voices. People who are enriching their families and their friends to the expense of our freedom and our democracy, folks. We live in a multicultural society. No one's going back. I'm not going back. Deborah's not going back. Harris not going back. In Israel and Palestine, no one's going back. Our futures are intertwined and they're shared. That's the reality, whether people like it or not. Our futures are intertwined. And are we going to have a shared future of self-destruction, annihilation, or are we going to finally have wise leaders realize that no, our futures are rooted in peace and security for all of us and all of our families? We're trying our best. This conversation was just one of many that hopefully can enlighten some people, connect the dots, and show that we might not agree on everything, but we agree on most things, and we agree on the basics, and we agree that fascism is bad for marginalized communities, especially Jews, Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians, especially in America and especially in abroad. And folks, I do want to remind people that the United States of America has a really unique role in that without our weapons, without our diplomatic support, without our money, this current Israeli regime, a war criminal regime, cannot do what it's doing, which, in my opinion, is a genocide and an occupation which will be disastrous for the Palestinian people, but also disastrous for Israel and the Jews and the region and for the United States of America. In 1982, Ronald Reagan picked up the phone, called Israel's Prime Minister Begin, and said, I'm horrified by what I'm seeing right now in Lebanon. You better end this right now. Within 30 minutes, Begin called them back and said, okay, ceasefire. But unfortunately, we have Donald Trump. So here we are. Folks, increase the pressure, speak out, become educated, become informed. And the way to do that is to support Deborah and Harris. I will let you all leave and bring in Allison, who's been super patient. But Deb, shamelessly promote yourself.
Well, thank you so much to watch for having me. Thank you to Horace, and yeah, folks, please subscribe to the debrief. And I hope you'll have me back.
I will, and this will be up in an hour. We're going to have it published. I know there's about 1,200 people who watch. We've been speaking for an hour. Strongly recommend come back once it's published on my Substack and Deb's Substack. You'll have a transcript. Really, it's a fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to smart guests. Horace, shamelessly promote yourself.
Thanks for having me, Jahad. It was great meeting you virtually, Deborah. We'll definitely be in touch. Twitter, Instagram, Harris Tareen. But most of all, please keep supporting Watch, because Watch brings awesome people and smart people together to have conversations like this where you can't find really anywhere else.
I'll Venmo you, Horace, your tip. This is the left hook. There are no paywalls because I'm a terrible capitalist. Everything's for free. If you have a few bucks, wonderful. Send it so I can feed one of my 400 children. If not, become a subscriber. Please listen to this. If you've come in late, share this. I think it's a really good conversation. The nuances were fantastic. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Horace. Let's do this again. And folks, stay on. Well, come back in 1 minute. Allison Gill has been waiting patiently for Mueller. She writes. We're going to talk about the authoritarian regime of Donald Trump. Thanks, Deb. I'll see you soon. All right, folks. If you're sticking with me, let me just call in Allison. Allison, hold on. Sorry, you got to see my face. This is what you got to do. This is how the sausage, halal sausage, is made. There you go. All right, Allison. And let me now message Allison. Allison, I'm ready. Sent you an invite. So we're going about fascism abroad when we're talking about Netanyahu to fascism at home. Allison, thank you so much. I've been telling everyone that you've been so patient. You were supposed to come out at 1 o'clock, but I had this fantastic ongoing conversation with Deb and Harris, talking about what's happening in Israel and Palestine and how the ADL has become a shanda, and has working with this Trump administration to go after our civil liberties and our freedoms. And speaking about civil liberties and freedoms and things we took for granted, folks, the National Guard has been unleashed in the nation's capital. This is not normal. And I remember I asked Allison yesterday, "What do you want to talk about?" She goes, "Oh, don't worry. There will be chaos in the morning that we will talk about." And lo and behold, we have Donald Trump, uh, this piece of shit. I rarely swear, but I'm just so, maybe I'm tired. This man, I mean, the fact that I'm going to say this out loud shows you that we can no longer use Allison Idiocracy as a fantastic analogy, because even the movie Idiocracy, directed by Mike Judge, he wasn't this idiotic. We have a man named Big Balls, a 19-year-old Doge incel who alleges he was carjacked by young black folks. And based off that allegation, Donald Trump says, "Look at DC. It's so, the crime is everywhere. I might have to federalize it. I don't know." Crime rates are historic low in DC. Crime rates are historic low in the nation. But lo and behold, a few days later, as of today, Donald Trump has unleashed the FBI and National Guard in the nation's capital, where 800 people will just literally be walking around instead of, doing their job, which is assessing domestic and foreign threats, assessing, foreign interference in our elections, I don't know, Russia, and instead just terrorizing local DC folks, which includes many Republicans, by the way, who voted for this, and many Republican elected officials whose family lives in DC, by the way. And we have Vladimir Putin, who is, going to have a chat with Donald Trump in Alaska. And I don't know if you saw the press conference today where Donald Trump yet again throws Ukraine under the bus, blames Ukraine for being invaded by Russia and having Eastern Ukraine occupied by Russia. As this is happening, folks, I want to remind everyone, as Donald Trump and Republicans are talking about cracking down on crime, that pedophile, Ghislaine Maxwell, partner in crime of Jeffrey Epstein, she is having a gay old time in Texas, where I'm at right now, visiting family. Is moved to a minimum security camp, and all those violent insurrectionists who beat up cops and smeared shit in the U.S. Capitol are pardoned. I gave a mouthful, but Allison, I yield the floor to you.
Waj, we're about to dish so much tea that I feel like I should be like laying on my stomach on my brass trundle bed with my Lisa Frank bedspread in 1987 on my see-through neon phone twirling my hair. That like that I think feel like that should be the setup for our show. Because we're about to dish just so much tea. As I said
If
last
we get
night, I there
my
was gonna
chai cup here, it's going to be a chai party. Let's do it.
woohoo. I these are my own. I have my own personal like I am my own new barista in my kitchen because I stopped going to Starbucks because they failed to unionize in my neighborhood a while back. So I'm with you on that. But let's talk just first about a couple of glaring obvious points here. First of all, by deploying the National Guard in D.C. on August 11th, Trump is admitting that he could have deployed the National Guard on January 6th. It wasn't up to Nancy Pelosi. And and I mean, this isn't criminally relevant anymore because he won the election and Jack Smith has resigned his position. But this is something that would come up in evidence in a Jack Smith motion notification to the court because Donald Trump had insisted that he tried to call out the National Guard, but he couldn't. It was Nancy Pelosi's job on January 6th. And so when there was actual violence and people trying to murder police officers on January 6th during an insurrection,
Yep.
there was no need to call out the National Guard. But now that crime is down 26%, except in the White House, in DC. He's completely able and totally willing to call out the National Guard and the DEA like I saw a video of a couple of DEA officers in full gear walking through the mall while like people were jogging and hey good morning and they're like walking through the National Mall, much like we saw in Los Angeles, which by the way is on trial right now. And if you want to follow the blow by blow of that, Adam Klasfeld is covering it. Anna Bauer is covering it. Some really amazing independent journalists are telling us what's going on in that courtroom right now. So we have that. And then with the Ghislaine Maxwell stuff, we have a judge, Judge Engelmeyer, calling out the government to the mat, saying, we know that your entire premise here to unseal these grand jury transcripts was bullshit. And in fact, he said the only colorable argument to unseal these Maxwell grand jury transcripts is to show that you are full of shit, government, to show that you are being disingenuous in your motion to unseal, that this is going to reveal all sorts of new information that the public desperately needs because you made that up. You misled the court, you misled the public, and you admitted it in our in-camera review when I asked you to tell me what the new relevant, interesting parts of the Ghislaine Maxwell grand jury testimonies are, and you didn't have any. You highlighted words like and the and things that weren't public yet that are in these grand jury transcripts. So you admitted to as much behind closed doors, but not in your public filings and not what you said to the public. And I'm about to write this up on my Substack. It's free to subscribe, by the way, MillerShewWrote.com, because you and I are masochists, my friend. But
Everyone, by the way, who does, I think most of my subscribers already subscribe to you, but if you haven't, it's of course, again, let me do a proper introduction. I thought everyone would know. And plus, I hyped you up in my previous conversation, but this is Allison Gill of Mueller. She wrote, you know her, you love her. She's also the host of the fantastic Daily Beans podcast, where she breaks down the daily news with some swear words and some humor. But Mueller, she notes also, Mueller, she writes, also broke some fantastic news that later got scooped up by corporate media that didn't give her the proper props, which is that she had it from FBI sources that FBI, a division of the FBI, was tasked with looking at Donald Trump's name in the thousands of documents and then redacting it. And by the way, this entire division has access to an Excel sheet. So everyone was able to just dive in there and leak, leak, leak. Allison was the person who had that scoop, and she has a whole bunch of amazing scoops. And like me, she's a masochist and a terrible capitalist, and she does it all for free. But that doesn't mean if that you should not support her. So if you have a few bucks because you also don't shop at Starbucks anymore, send that $5 to Allison.
yeah,
Continue, Allison.
this is my small protest against late stage capitalism, as all of my content is free. And thank you for following and subscribing. I know there are like 2 or 3 big voices out there who don't like what I do, and you can read all about why they hate me behind their paywalls. But all my stuff is free. So
Yeah, we have to
any
talk about that one day. We have to talk about that one day because these people are like, Allison, I can't believe you are on. Have her on. I'm like, Allison? And like, there's like some rumors about you. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. I'm like, Allison's good with me, and I'm good with Allison. So far, I've been talking to her for a year. She's solid. But yeah, that must mean you're doing something right because you got a little smear campaign behind you. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, they claim I'm blue wave adjacent, which I don't know what that means. I vote for Democrats. But other than that, yeah, there was like a big hit piece out on me in 2023. It's all been debunked. All of those accounts have been suspended, and but you know what? Hey, I'm not everybody's cup of chai, and that's fine. I'm just here to help expose through sourcing from people that I know and some that I don't know, but now have become friends with, who actually work in the federal government, that have seen the Epstein files, that have gone through them, that have been asked to redact them, that have been sent training videos on how to flag Trump's name, which I am suing to wrest from the government, to get from the government. And that lawsuit was over a week ago, and it's been assigned to Judge Beryl Howell. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Now I want to get at the actual Epstein files, not some bullshit grand jury testimony in the Maxwell case that the judge is like, this is all already public anyway. But I wanted to ask you what you thought about, because we've seen sort of this coming. We knew this was going to happen, that he was going to federalize the police, that there was going to be this kind of action. We saw the trial run in Los Angeles, where they desperately tried to show up. They tried to entice people into being violent against them, and it didn't happen. They are trying desperately to to bring charges. The LA U.S. attorney is trying to bring charges against protesters in LA. And he's only been able to get, I think, 5 true bill indictments from federal grand juries out of like 38 or 40. And it's also come to light that it's because the ICE agents and CBP agents and the other agents in these situations are lying to the court and lying in their statements. And so he tried this, and now he wants to try it in DC, I guess. And the so far, I had asked the hive mind, like, what's the animus behind this? Like, why now? And as you know, like myself and several other pundits and people have been writing Substacks about how we organize, and right now we do it away from the Capitol, like No Kings, for example. It wasn't an official No Kings in the Capitol. And we get it and we build it up and we build it up until like summer of 2026 when we all descend on the Capitol and have a very peaceful protest. But I think he's maybe just prepping for that, or trying to get people in DC used to the fact that there's going to be federally militarized Gestapo walking around the Capitol. And I think, again, this is to entice people into protest, which are fine and legal, but they're trying to create a violent situation so they can call it an anarchic jurisdiction and just arrest people and detain them without due process. And he's going to be building the army to do that by hiring 10,000 ICE agents over the next year. And I think that that's what he's working toward. And again, on into 2028, when he will be
My
supposed to leave the White House.
my take on this, and this is the world's worst I told you so, and I get no joy in this because there's no win except fascism. I've been taking Trump literally and seriously, and I just want to connect the dots, and I agree with what you've laid out, and I just want to bring some receipts. In 2019, I believe you, along with me and others, said that he will not leave peacefully. He did not leave peacefully. He engaged in a violent insurrection that he supported, that he applauded. He did not care that his own vice president at the time was going to be thrown to the wolves. He wanted him thrown to the wolves because at the last second, Mike Pence had some liquid courage in the form of a phone call with Dan Quayle and conservative Judge Ludick, who said, please do your job and certify the election. He could have called the National Guard. Those police officers were left to fend for themselves. They were left to die. Let's be honest. His mob overran the U.S. Capitol. They smeared shit in the U.S. Capitol. A few of them came with weapons who tried to assassinate Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. Some of them came with violence and violent intent. That included Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt was in part radicalized by the QAnon conspiracy. The QAnon conspiracy, folks, and I promise, just stick with me. We'll all connect the dots. The QAnon conspiracy was promoted by Donald Trump and Dan Bongino and right-wing media and Kash Patel because it posited that the only person who could cleanse the swamp, the only person who can reform and redeem America from the deep state that is threatening to corrupt it and take your child and molest your child and kill your child, it was Donald Trump, because they believe that everyone who opposes Donald Trump, including myself, Allison, corporate media, the Democrats, liberals, students, the FBI, are part and parcel of an international cabal run by the Jews to abduct, abuse, and kill children. I'm not making this up. That's QAnon. So that's why QAnon was so important and integral to the right wing, because there was only one person who, if they were elected again, could come and purge the deep state and also reveal the machinations of this evil cabal through the release of the Epstein files. Well, guess who's not going to release the Epstein files? Donald Trump. Why? Because he's all up in the Epstein files. Donald Trump runs again because he realizes if he's not elected again, this dude will most likely go to jail. Why? For inciting a violent insurrection. Why? Because we have him on tape calling the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, asking him for the exact number of votes that would give him Georgia. That's illegal, by the way, for stealing documents and lying to the FBI about it. We still don't know what he did with these national security documents. We still don't know who has access to them. We still don't know if he sold them to foreign countries, right? Another crime. And in addition to that, he is a convicted criminal. So he runs again to escape going to jail. The Supreme Court last year says absolute immunity for let's be honest, Allison, not for President Biden, for Trump, right? For crimes. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant actions done within the scope of the executive office. He gets elected again. Before he gets elected, a quote I have kept repeating ad nauseum, and I'm sure people thought I was going crazy. I said, pay attention to what he said in October. He quoted Hitler yet again and said that he would unleash the National Guard and the military against the quote enemy from within. He said it. He said it, Allison. And once he said it, I said, folks, you're not paying attention. He promised to terminate the Constitution. He said he'd be a dictator for a day. He's telling his base, once you vote for me this one time, you won't have to vote again. And I've been saying, and you've been saying, with Project 2025 and what he has said and what he has shown, once he gets in power, he is going to purge the FBI. The FBI just came out 2 days ago. FBI agents are openly now saying he's purging the FBI. The head of the FBI is Kash Patel, a man with zero law enforcement experience, a man who's a conspiracy theorist, a man who had a hit list of targets that he promoted on Steve Bannon, said that once we get in power, we're going to go after the deep state, the media, people like me, Allison, maybe others, and also, anyone who opposes him. He has Pam Bondi, another yes woman, right? He has Kristi Noem. He has Pete Hegseth, right? So the purge is already done. The purge of the bureaucracy is happening. He's already taken out his appointee to the IRS because the IRS balked at giving him our private information that he wanted to give to ICE. Speaking about ICE, just stick with me, Allison. I'm almost done. I'm cooking, but I'm almost done. Speaking about ICE, the big billionaire bill. Yes, it's going to dismantle Medicaid. It's going to add $3 trillion to the debt. It's going to give permanent tax cuts to the rich. But what did me and Allison and others keep saying? Pay attention. In addition to all that, which is terrible, the $180 billion that is now given to ICE, where ICE now has a bigger budget than most countries spend on their militaries. If ICE was a country, as a result of the big, beautiful bill, ICE has the 16th largest military budget, 10,000 agents, masked armed agents, a personal, wait for it, army. What do we call it? Gestapo. What do we call it? Savak. What do we call it? The brown shirts. He unleashes it in LA. Now they're terrorizing LA residents, citizens. It's normalized, as Allison said. He now has the military and National Guard joining ICE for no reason to terrorize LA. Normalized. Now that was normalized. So he says, okay, let me see if I could get away with it in the nation's capital. Happening right now, normalized. Why? Why? Because I predict, and I hope I am wrong, Allison. What I've said, what Danielle Moody has said, what you have said is if things get bad for him, and folks, things are getting really bad, 89% of Americans are following Epstein. It is the only bipartisan issue in America. His ratings and approval rating are down. He's down double digits on the economy. Uh, Folks, it seems like we're going to have a recession. If you're following the economic numbers and the data, it's looking really bad. People are moving away from the brosphere and Rogan, right? Things are looking bad, Allison. So what he's going to do, sooner than I thought what he's going to do, is the following. By the power vested in me as the President of the United States of America, I have to declare martial law. I have to save the country. Don't worry, the midterm elections will come back. Don't worry, the 2028 elections will come back. But for the time being, I have to declare martial law. I have to unleash ICE and the National Guard and the FBI on the streets. And I'm also going to invoke the Insurrection Act because there is a subversive element in America. Antifa, invaders, immigrants, subversive, whatever. All right. Oh, what? You're rising up against us? That's the enemy. I have to quash him. And again, my final receipt, Stephen Miller unleashed ICE against Home Depot, against 7-Eleven, and what he wanted, folks, what he wanted, what we know from reporting and from leaks, is he wanted the uprising and the insurrection and the resistance. He wanted people to square off against ICE because that would then justify the crackdown. So I believe what we're witnessing in real time is an authoritarian flexing and setting the stage for martial law. I'm sorry for my rant, Allison. I yield the floor to you.
No, this is what we've been talking about, and this is another step in that process, right? And we also have to remember, when you talk about his own personal army and how it has, it's funded to the tune of $180 billion from the billionaire bailout bill. We also have to remember that ICE has fewer restrictions on what they can do to the public, as far as detention, as far as getting to be able to call a lawyer, as far as profiling, and that's actually in the courts right now. But ICE has fewer restrictions. And so it's not like he could mobilize the already law enforcement, the existing law enforcement, to do his illegal stuff for him. He's got to build one of loyalists by offering huge signing bonuses and things like that. And also by using ICE, he is able to circumvent some of the due process protections that citizens have, and actually that everyone in the United States has, whether you're a citizen or not, because if you're on US soil, you are protected by the Constitution, and you're also enjoined by the responsibilities of a person in the United States under the Constitution.
Allegedly. We used to be.
Right. And that's also still being litigated. But I think it's also interesting that both of these cities, Los Angeles and DC, what do their mayors have in common?
Hmm. Hmm. Are they Democrats? Are they Democrats?
Are they
Anti-Trump?
black women?
But black? They're also the black? Oh, they're the black, and they're the woman. Black female Democrats. Yes, sorry. I had
Right.
no idea. Allison, continue.
Hey, I'm glad. Well, I'm here to educate. Right. I thought that somebody had pointed that out on my post on Blue Sky. They're like, "Oh, that's interesting. What do Mayor Bass and Mayor Bowser have in common?" I'm like, "Oh, all right."
Or
Uh,
also Letitia James and Oprah and Beyonce and also Obama, not a woman, but also yeah. Sorry, continue. Yes,
mhm.
the subject of his ire the last 2 weeks.
Right. And so here we are. And I know a lot of people are like, what he's doing right now is a distraction from the Epstein files. I don't think so. I think this was Stephen Miller's plan from the beginning. And this is the timeline on which it must be executed in order to beat the 2026 midterms. Um, and I do think it's important to talk about this and the federalization of DC. And I also was curious as to why he wants to take over the Metropolitan Police Department, right?
Mm.
Because I remember when the giant roving gang of black trans Muslims came after big balls, and it was like,
Sorry, excuse me, Allison. Muslim socialists. Let's just get it all correct.
sorry, Marxist Muslim socialist, right?
Thank you.
Sorry. And Pope Leo was probably there
Yes.
to help beat up big balls because he's woke. But anyway, I was thinking to myself, okay, MPD is investigating. Good. Not, a federal police organization. Oh, well, now the MPD is also a federal police organization, and Trump can and will direct investigations and stop investigations and have control over those investigations so people like us don't find out that maybe those two teenagers that beat up Big Balls McGinty or whatever his name is, uh, weren't paid to do so, or there wouldn't be any
Mm.
investigation into how that came about. I know that's just kind of tinfoil hatty. He may just have been beaten up because he's a piece of shit asshole. But here we are, and I'm thinking, good. MPD is looking into this, and now MPD is controlled by Donald Trump too.
Mm. Mm. It's a situation where folks in real time. Look, I said this. I hope I'm wrong. I remember I woke up today and I was like, "We're cooked." U.S. is cooked for a while, and I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But the damage is generational, folks. The damage is already generational. The dismantling of Department of Education, the dismantling of USAID, our tourism economy is down in the shitter. Our allies have turned away from us. Our infrastructure is being dismantled before our eyes. Tax cuts to the rich. Medicaid's going to be gone in 2026. And we have now the normalization of masked armed ICE agents with the FBI and the National Guard terrorizing U.S. citizens and putting us in check. And furthermore, complete lack of transparency. Any judges are being purged, FBI is being purged, IRS is being purged, FAA is being purged, flights are no longer safe. Stephen Miller, and I'm glad you brought it back to Stephen Miller. I think it's very important. Last week, I had an interview with Jean Guerrero. I recommend everyone going back and watching that interview. Jean Guerrero did a fantastic book on Stephen Miller called Hate Monger. And what we did in that interview is we just took the DeLorean throughout his entire life, his modus operandi, his ideology, how he got radicalized, his end game. He does not care, folks. He is dyed in the wool, true believer. He's willing to die on the battlefield for this white supremacist agenda. He's willing to burn it all down. Then you also have Russell Vought, another shadow president, a white Christian nationalist who is the architect of Project 2025.
He was in
And
the
then you
first administration. He was the one who helped withhold the Ukraine funds that Trump was impeached over. And he was also there when I was removed from my position after my podcast about the Mueller investigation was investigated by the Department of Veterans Affairs. So yeah, Russ
you
Vought
and,
is
and then you
is
have
not
Donald
a
Trump.
win.
And then you have Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the bro oligarchy and JD Vance. Literally, his only job is to wait until Donald Trump dies. That's his only job. This dude vacations more than any vice president I've ever seen. His job, Peter Thiel, is just like stay there, stay warm, and we're waiting for this mechanicals to drop pretty soon. And then the bro oligarchy will take over with their techno-fascist ideology, which they perfectly are perfectly open with sharing with the world. Curtis Yarvin, their incel guru, who's dumb as shit, but most of these people are dumb, and he says that capitalism is incompatible with democracy. And by the way, who follows Curtis Yarvin? Also J.D. Vance, right?
Yeah.
So you got these authoritarian forces, kind of aligned, but not really. But they share enough, eugenics, greed, power by any means necessary, and then you got Donald Trump, who really wants to basically make as much money as he possibly can, have sex with as many girls as he still possibly can, if he still can, and
Great
avoid jail.
replacement. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great, brilliant. It's all happening in real time. And Allison, as this is happening, I have to ask you about the Democrats. Finally, we saw a couple of days ago Ken Martin, head of the DNC, finally say the following: "We're going to fight fire with fire. Democrats are no longer bringing a pencil to a knife fight." And I thought, Ken, you're almost there. First of all, I gave him props. Good for you. You're almost there. You need to bring a bazooka to a knife fight. That's what Republicans are bringing. And then you're seeing Pritzker, Newsom, and Hochul. I give credit where credit's due, folks. Finally saying, all right, if you're going to gerrymander, we're going to gerrymander. My take on this, Allison, is gerrymandering is terrible. However, they're going to gerrymander. They're going to cheat. Texan Republicans are already telling you, and JD Vance and Donald Trump are now pressuring Indiana. So maybe we have to be proactive on certain things, but I give it to you.
Yeah, a couple things. You talked about Miss Guerrero. I had her on the Daily Beans to talk about Hate
Fantastic.
Poetry, which she wrote in 2020. And everybody, if you're here and you haven't yet listened to the Daily Beans, I implore you to give it a try. It is free wherever you get your podcasts. I will get you all of the news that you need, and I will do it in a way that doesn't make you like super angry and anxious and irritated. Like I'm trying to help maintain sanity and increase knowledge. So if you haven't tried the Daily Beans, give it a shot. I really recommend it. Again, free because I suck at capitalism, which I'm proudly suck at capitalism. Something else before I get to the Democrats that you brought up are all these things that are going away that are going to take generations to fix. One of the things that I think is being a little bit overlooked, not necessarily by you or anybody here in this particular space, but in the mainstream media, is something that judges have continued to push back on, like Judge Policini's, and I mean, there's been a ton of judges who have brought this up, but it's called the presumption of regularity, and what that is during in court proceedings. Generally, you can trust the government and take them at their word by what they say, by saying, hey, we have a national security issue that requires us to invoke the Alien Enemies Act. Generally, the court's like, well, presumption of regularity, the DOJ is not going to lie to my face. But that has been completely erased. The presumption of regularity is gonzo, according to several judges who have responded to this particular Department of Justice making misrepresentations, which here, on independent media, we call lies, in courtrooms across the country. That presumption of regularity, um, I remember. I remember Joyce Vance did a piece in Time Magazine in 2019, and she quoted me in that piece about something I said about the death of Jeffrey Epstein, because my tweet, it was a tweet at the time because Blue Sky didn't exist. My tweet at the time was, whether you think there are nefarious things afoot in the death of Jeffrey Epstein, or you think that the DOJ turned a blind eye to it, the point is that nobody can trust the Department of Justice. Nobody. And she said, if no one can trust that the Department of Justice is doing justice, then we are in a very bad place. And now
Yep.
we're so far beyond that, with this loss of presumption of regularity, and that judges and the judiciary cannot take the DOJ at can't take what they say at face value. Then the reservoir, as she calls it, the reservoir of trust, is completely drained. And to build that back, to build not just our trust in the Department of Justice, which is decimated, but the court's trust in the Department of Justice, is also something that is lost and will take decades to repair. Now, as far as Democrats, yay, Ken Martin for saying we need to bring something to a whatever fight. I'm not quite seeing that yet.
Yeah,
I'm
me
seeing
either.
I'm seeing people say we need to bring a whatever to a whatever fight, but I'm not seeing them walk in with that bazooka or the gun or not a pencil or whatever they whatever they use in that particular allegory. I see them saying that they want to do this. I see them now. I know Gavin Newsom has lobbied some legislators in California. Great. I haven't seen any maps, and I haven't seen anything to the effect of actual concrete steps being taken to counter the gerrymandering. And that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I don't think what the Democrats are doing is gerrymandering. Just like if somebody tries to kill me and I kill them first, I didn't murder them.
Yeah.
I am using self-defense. I'm practicing self-defense, right? I think we need to come up with a better name for it. Something that isn't gerrymandering, something like map correction or voter protection, or,
I agree with you. I think it's
some,
smart. I think it's smart framing.
something I can put on a bumper sticker where when I say it, everybody goes, yeah, that. Something that's not too wonky. God bless Elizabeth Warren. She was my candidate in 2020. But people aren't. A lot of folks just aren't really into the wonk. Like when Democrats fight back and we talk about GDP, the person who can't pay their bills is like, what the hell is GDP? I don't care.
How
I can.
about no taxation without representation?
That's a pretty good one. I've heard that before. Where have I heard that before? So that's the focus, and I hope that the reason we haven't seen the action yet is because they're back there trying to formulate how they're going to present this to the public
Mm.
in a way that we can all get behind. But I will say this: once they come out with the maps, once they start setting up the special elections, like here in California, for example, once they start doing it, the entire country is going to get behind them. Their numbers are going to come out of the gutter, and we will be able, this is their opportunity to show us they're fighting for us, because right now the polling is it's ambiguous. It's like we don't feel like they're fighting for us, and you and I can cite tons of examples where they are, but again, it's sort of wonky. So that single act across the country, and again, don't meet them seat for seat, blow them out of the water, because we're already 7 to 13 seats down from
Yep.
previous gerrymandering
Yep.
on the Republican side. So
I,
figure
I,
out
I
a way to
agree with you.
frame it, and let's get on it. Let's start doing it, and have the DNC heavily involved in it. Have the Governors Association heavily involved in it. Have the Democrats in Congress heavily involved in it and talking about it all the time, every day. That is the bringing the whatever to the whatever fight that I think that we need in this country. And I think it is something that will really rally Democrats in general, especially people who are a little bit kind of feeling like we're rudderless and lost and we don't have leadership. This is your chance to grab the reins and be the leadership that we're all sort of hoping for. Now, again, a lot of this is on us. I don't want to relieve us of our responsibility in democracy. We have the main responsibility in democracy that we get the government we deserve, so to speak, right? We can't abdicate ourselves and wait for somebody to come and save us. We can't have that mentality. We had it with Mueller, we had it with Jack Smith, we had it with Merrick Garland, we had it with, somebody will come and save us. That's a dictator's dream, right? We are the people. We decide who our candidates are. If you don't like who's being put up as your candidate, then you run or you find somebody to put up. It is not some ambiguous group like the DNC's job to create a candidate in a laboratory that's awesome to put out in front of you and spoon feed you your most awesome candidate. We decide those things. This is our government, and I don't want to abdicate our responsibility. But that being said, the things that the DNC and the Democratic leadership can do are things like this, things that we can't do.
Exactly.
And this is their opportunity, and they need to seize it and strike while the iron is hot. And if they're having meetings saying, well, maybe we should unleash this a little bit later on, so it's closer to the midterms. That's not how you fight an oligarch or fight a dictator. You don't say, well, let's wait a little bit until it's strategically great.
We should have done this last month. I think they're behind on the 8 ball. I give credit where credit's due because it's something,
Yeah.
but they're openly going to do this. Texas Republicans are going to gerrymander. Trump and Vance are pressuring Indiana. They are openly testing authoritarianism by unleashing the military and National Guard against.
Missouri. Yeah, they're doing this in a ton of states. The gerrymandering.
It's happening. So what you have to say is the following: all right, we're going to reapportion our seats. We're going to have fair representation. That's what I call it. We're going to have fair representation, and without California and New York and Illinois, I mean, Republicans aren't stupid, folks. Republicans in California right now are really freaked out by this threat. Sorry, go ahead.
What if they tie it to, because you said no taxation without representation? What if they tie it to, how Gavin Newsom has been like, well, if you're going to spend our tax dollars on this, I'm not sending you my state revenue.
That was my second point.
Why don't we tie it with that and say, if we're going to continue to send you our California residents' tax dollars for federal stuff, they need to be properly represented, and that's why we're doing this.
I would doubt. So you read my mind. Great minds think alike. Well, I don't know about great minds, but terrible capitalist minds who want to save our democracy think alike. I would openly say that. I said, "Mother effer, you want to attack us? Okay, I'm not going to give you my tax dollars, and you need my tax dollars because we gave an $80 billion surplus to help subsidize the red states, right? So without our money, red states will not get any aid. All right, mother effer, try it, try it. What do you got to lose? They're openly dog walking you, they're mocking you, they've unleashed the military against you, they already ridicule you. Already in the first administration, when there were devastating fires, he laughed at you, right? He spread conspiracy theories. California is my home state. California is the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world. California has 40 million people, the most populous state. California does fair representation. Republicans are wiped out, right? Even if California with 2026, go ahead, Texas, go ahead, Indiana, do whatever you want. You're probably going to lose the midterms. And then if Illinois joins you and New York joins you, it's a wrap. And if New York, Illinois, and California, these three states and three governors in these three states are said, all right, you're going to attack us, you're going to mock us, you're going to unleash the National Guard against us. We're not sending our taxpayer dollars. We don't need you. We're pretty good. We'll be okay.
But then, as you say, with all of this nationalizing, the federalizing, and Insurrection Act, and all that stuff, then we're going to see Trump ahead of the election saying, "I have to declare martial law because of the lawless gerrymandering by Democrats, taking blah blah blah." That's
You're gonna do it anyway, Allison, but they're gonna do it what I want to tell everyone, seeing it.
Yeah,
They're
I'm not saying
going
that this is a
to
reason not to do it.
no, no. But what I'm saying is for the Democrats, well, then they'll do this, the Chuck Schumer approach to life. Like, but they're gonna do this. They're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
They are already doing it. It's done. They did the coup. They did the violent insurrection. They rigged the courts, right? They're gerrymandering in Texas right now, openly, without any shame. They've unleashed the National Guard. They've unleashed the military. He lied. He's federalized DC. What more do you need to see? They bum rushed the BBB. They have Emile Bouvet there, right? They're covering up the Epstein scandal. They're lying to the public. They're doing it in real time. Our job is then to say enough, right? And so I need them to first and foremost not threaten it, but just like, here's the plans. We drew it up, and then sell it to the people. All right, go ahead. Supreme Court, if you say it's okay for Texas Republicans to just openly steal seats, all right, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and
We have
California did. Do you live in California?
not anymore.
Okay,
I
because
lived
we
there
got
for
we
20 years.
we all got emails from Gavin Newsom that said, "Hey, are you with me on this? If I do this, are you with me?" So I think that outreach is happening. Um, I just hope that they don't overpull this. Do you know what I mean?
Of course they are, Allison. They're overpulling it. They're all sitting there like losers right now, overpulling. We know them. We know the DNC. We know the corporate consulting guys. Like, Schumer's going to be there, and the Jeffries and Elisa Slotkin and Third Way is going to be like, I don't know. If we do this, then we lose Chuck and in the Rust Belt who hasn't voted for us in 10 years, and we might. Then the right wing will say this and do that. So maybe we should just tread
Right.
carefully.
They bring in the 1986 playbook and ask Jim Carville what he would do. Right. Like, yeah.
Carbon's like, we can just play dead. We should just play pass and play dead because the economy's going really bad right now. I think, the people will rise up. I don't know what I'm saying. I can't even be bothered to take off my hat. People should listen to me, even though I haven't won an election in 30 years. What?
And I'm on a
Sorry.
yacht. I'm coming to you live from my yacht.
I'm a common man. I'm a common man coming to you from my yacht, one of my many yachts. Who gives a shit about James Carville, man? Sorry, the Crypt Keeper. I'm done with these people, Allison. I'm done with these people. We're dealing with fascists. They're freaking federalizing the DC. They've unleashed the National Guard against the American people. They're lying to us about Epstein. We've seen it, Allison. We've seen it. We need the people to put the pressure. Look, you know why the Democrats are even saying this? Because people like us, the pressure, they've seen the dwindling of the polls. They've seen the dwindling in the donations. They've seen people get fed the f up, which is why you saw Elisa Slotkin last week go on her tour. Which is why you saw Ken Martin say, "We're going to fight fire with fire." I mean, so if we double down and we have the numbers, Allison, it will force their hand to do the right thing, in my humble opinion. Secondly, what we have to do is I think we have to take it to the streets. We have the numbers. I think we need boycotts and strikes. Your take. Oh, Sue, perfect timing. Sue said national boycotts. I didn't even right as I said it. Your take on this, because I think the thing that I was telling someone is what could really move people in America, right? Because I think we might be for a while, but this country worships money, Allison. The color green still trumps the color white. This country loves money. Um, if the economy starts going bad, which it will, that will be the one thing that'll wake up some of these folks and be like, all right, maybe it's time to do away with the Trump and Vance. Your take.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I appreciate the boycotts. I boycott wherever I can. I certainly have stopped watching all of the Dean Cain material that I have in my media library. That was an easy boycott, by the way. I also am very big on not Meal Team 6. I'm also not really big on shaming people who cannot boycott certain things because maybe they're in a food desert or maybe they, like a lot of folks are like general strike. And I'm like, there's a lot of, single moms out there who can't general
Those who
strike.
can, I agree with you. Those
Yeah.
who can,
But those
those
who
are
can,
people.
like what I've done, right? Like I get rid of my Starbucks, I get rid of my Amazon, I cancel my Paramount, except I keep signing up for the free trial with different email addresses so I can watch Colbert, and then canceling my free trials over and over again, and then telling them the reason why I'm canceling is because they're going to put out nothing but bullshit gruel. So things like that, I can do that, right? There are not a lot of people who are able to do those types of things or would even have those kinds of subscriptions in the first place. But yeah, no, I'm all for that stuff. We saw we had a blackout earlier this year, right, on Amazon, and I think it made a dent, but also everybody just kind of goes back to doing it. So I think that the best way to resist is things like that, things you can do locally. Get together with people in your community, because one of the tools of a dictator is to isolate us from one another.
Yep.
And like, for example, there's a couple things going on in San Diego that are pretty cool. We have a group of moms that get together and go from school district to school district and ask them to hand over their plans when ICE visits the schools. and they want those written plans in 2 weeks or whatever.
That's
What a
awesome.
great way to resist. We have a thing here in San Diego, and I encourage if you don't have this in your town, to do it in your town, called social study, where you have professors and experts go to a bar or a brewery and give like TED Talks, lectures, right? That almost feels like a subversive underground informative education sort of thing to do. It seems, I don't know, it seems sabotaging and cool to me that people are getting together in spaces to talk about important subjects and doing it kind of in secret. And so there's all kinds of ways to do this, but I think the most important thing is to make sure that you are continually connected with your community and like-minded people in your community, so that you aren't isolated. Because once you're isolated, you can be gaslit. You can feel hopeless. You feel alone, which is a very terrible and dangerous feeling. So anything people can do, and even if it's to get together and crochet in your living room and talk about where you're not going to spend your dollars next week, I think that's super powerful.
Allison, the final question I want to ask you, because this is kind of slightly breaking issue news in the last hour. One of the things also I recommend doing, and I think this will be very popular, is openly start promoting Supreme Court reform. Triple down on it, if you will. The Supreme Court has formally been asked to overturn a same-sex marriage ruling. Kim Davis, a former clerk who refused gay couples, has brought the appeal that came out today. I have been on record saying that I believe after Roe, Obergefell is next. Anyone who said no, 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 it's not going to happen, it's too much, they're going to do it. But I hope I'm wrong. What do you think?
I think Voting Rights Act is next. The what's left of it with the Louisiana case, and then Obergefell, and they can do two. They can stomp on 4 or 5 or 6 of our rights at once. So it's not like it has to go in a consecutive order. They can do it all, all in the next term. But Supreme Court reform, you've heard the Abbott and Costello, who's on first? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Who's on, yeah, the famous routine? Yes.
Who's on first, what's on second, I don't know, is on third base. And they always end up on third base. And by the end of the sketch, they're like, third base, they keep going to third base. And in my head, to me, everything that I work out, like, we're going to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Oh, but then somebody in the Northern District of Texas is going to sue with Judge Kazmarek, and then it's going to go up to the Supreme Court. Third base! Like, the Supreme Court is third base for every awesome thing I can think of, even when we wrest power from the Republicans, even if it's in all 3 branch or all, the House, the Senate, and the White House, anything that we want to do, third base.
Yep.
Everything ends up at this Supreme Court. And so we absolutely have to address that, because if we don't, nothing else that we do is going to get past them. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? That's
No, and this was
huge.
a 45-year plan of the right wing, Leonard Leo, and the Federalist Society. They cannot win elections. They cannot win the majority. So instead of reforming and coming up with better policies and evolving, they're like, we'll just cheat through gerrymandering, violent insurrection, and the Supreme Court. And at the end of the
Mm.
day, we'll get to the Supreme Court. Well, we'll have our right wing hacks who have been groomed for decades in black robes, and they'll do the job that we couldn't do in Congress, and voila.
Yeah. Oh, you want to vote? Third base. Oh, you want to love who you love? Third base. Oh, you want to be in an interracial marriage? Third base. It's all going to end up there. And, and that's kind of why I love this idea of pushing back against the Republican gerrymandering. It's going to end up on third base. And this Supreme Court, as wily and shitty as they are going to have a real hard time parsing Republican gerrymandering and Democratic gerrymandering if it's both for the same reason. And
It's gonna be very.
since they've gutted the gerrymandering, they were allowing gerrymandering for even, you basically, even if I think the last thing is, now if you just come in and say, I am a racist and I really hate this group of black people right here in particular, and that's why I'm drawing the lines around them. You have to say something like that. And I think even pretty soon that's going to go away and be allowed, because everything goes to third base. But that's why I love this idea, is because it will have to go to third base, it will have to go to the Supreme Court, and they will have to either say no one can or everyone can, unless they find a way to say that red states can, but blue states can't.
And they will do that. And once they do that, it's over. Whatever small type of legitimacy they still had will be done.
But they're
And
also
maybe
in a huge political trouble, which makes it easier for us to run on court reform. See what I'm getting
that's
at?
yeah, no, you and me, we're in sync. I'm like, this is a win. This is a win for Democrats because what I said, what was it, a week ago, was at the end of the day, at the Supreme Court, if it allows Texas Republicans to cheat, which it will, you gotta let then California, Illinois, and New York do it. And if I'm California, Illinois, New York, all I'll say is, well, we're just following what the Texas Republicans are doing, and we're just doing what Donald Trump told Texas to do. So you're okay with that. Why aren't you okay with this? And then they're going to say, well, because we're Republican hacks. And then you have enraged a growing majority that hates Donald Trump and Republicans. And now you have pretty much put a target on yourself to be diluted through court expansion. So I don't know, Allison. They like you more than like me. I'm talking about the Democrats. They probably think I'm a crazy brown person. Hopefully, they listen to you. I think they should have been on top of this 2 weeks ago. Be proactive. Don't wait. Win over the people. Message. Donald Trump is underwater. And also Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. Still talk about Epstein. Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. And I will talk about Ghislaine Maxwell. Oh, you love cracking down on criminals, but you give Ghislaine Maxwell a cushy transfer for no reason. Why? Very hard to spin that away. And you'll even win over a lot of right wingers, people like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who realize that their base is radicalized on this issue. But what do I know? I'm a
Oh,
simple man who's sorry, go ahead.
and Senator Whitehouse, by the way, is asking for information on kind of the stuff that I was reporting about Ghislaine Maxwell having her public safety factor of being a sex offender waived to have her moved. So,
Who waived it? We
um,
still don't know who waived it or why.
right. And so White House is asking for that. And he's also asking why Todd Blanche did this. And also, I mean, there's a whole list of things. They want Miss Maxwell's security point score, custody level, and any requests for applications of and reasons for management variables. I have seen the document that says MVWAV, which stands for Management Variables Waiver. I've seen it with my eyes. I feel like maybe I should contact Senator Whitehouse about this. And I know the custody level, and I know the code for why they sent her, why they were able to waive that, and it's called a 308, right? So he's asking for all of that stuff from the DOJ. He's not going to get it. But again, the point necessarily isn't necessarily to get it. The point is to stand up and fight for us, fight for the survivors of Ghislaine Maxwell, and demand these things from this Department of Justice. And I don't even think the word justice should be in the title of that agency anymore. But we are seeing some really significant pushback at least, and so I'm happy about that.
And we should have, if anyone knows Senator Whitehouse or their aides, have them contact Allison because she's done the work that they should have done. And now I'm glad he's following up. And I'm also glad that Senator Wyden is on the money trail. The money trail will expose names and individuals who should be asked about Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, the relationship, how he made his money that financed his decades of sex abuse, and also the some really good questions about Donald Trump and why both of them got these loans and got money through Deutsche Bank. I don't know, just me thinking out loud.
And to be fair, Senator Whitehouse may have had someone from the agency at the Bureau of Prisons come and be a whistleblower in his office and give the same information to Senator Whitehouse that was given to me by my sources at the BOP. And that's why he's asking for these things. I'm demanding them through FOIA request. He's demanding them through his position as a senator. So we don't know where he necessarily got the information. But that's kind of what I feel like he got that through public reporting or through somebody that actually came to his office. So high five to him for that, for asking for that. But if you want to see what kind of reporting and scoops that I come out with from talking to people inside these agencies that have worked on the Epstein case. Again, it's free. It's MuellerSheWrote.com. You can subscribe for free, and you'll get an alert in your inbox whenever I get a scoop from a source. So thank you so much. I got to duck out of here, my friend.
Thank you. I was gonna shameless to promote you. I have to catch a flight to California to visit my family, but I appreciate you all, 2,000 people joining us. The people who were on for an hour listening to my conversation with Deb and Horace. It's really good conversation. That'll be out about the fascism abroad, Israel's regime, and how its enablers here, such as the ADL and others, are going after our rights and threatening security, not just for Palestinians and Jews in Israel and the region, but also for the United States of America and college students. And furthermore, the people who joined us about an hour ago, I'm talking to Allison Gill of Mueller, She Wrote, a fantastic website, no paywalls, and also the host of the Daily Beans podcast. And we were talking about the breaking news of today and bringing all the receipts. And Allison spilled the tea about how Donald Trump is going full authoritarian and normalizing it, and what we can do and what Democrats should do to fight back. Folks, their plan is in motion. They're not going to stop. They are not
Yeah.
going to stop.
And
We
if you
cannot be
are,
reacting.
sorry to interrupt, but if you are
No,
a federal government employee and you want to get some of this information that you know or that you've seen out to the public without risking your anonymity, my signal is MullerSheWrote.23. Feel free to reach out. I will always keep you anonymous, and anyone who's reached out to me and given me information knows that I will show you the entire article I intend to print before I publish it, so that you can pull out what you think you need to pull out in order to protect your anonymity. So if you are a federal government employee or you know one and you want to get this information out to the public but you're not sure how to do it safely, I can also help I can help you do that to the best of my ability. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but there's also places like Whistleblower Aid who can, if you want to go the legal whistleblower route. So I just wanted to make sure everybody had that information. Waj, you're the best.
no, you do all the work, folks. Please subscribe to Mueller, She Wrote. Become a paid subscriber if you have $5. She does the work. We have no paywalls. This is the left hook. I'm gonna pack, help my family, and then go to the airport. If you have a few bucks, send it my way. If you don't, send it to Allison's way first, and just become a free subscriber. All the content is free. There's no paywalls. We'll have this conversation up on our respective websites in about 30 minutes. There's about 2,000 people watching. Strongly recommend going back and listening to the beginning, where we talk about Donald Trump, the federalizing of Washington, D.C., the purging of the FBI, the end game of Stephen Miller and Russell Vaught. It's all here in this conversation. Thank you all for joining us. Be kind, be empathetic, and please, oh, please do not be a fascist. Take care, Allison.
Bye.